Yeah, right.
Bob and I just are from Denison.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
Hi, Bob. How you doing?
Remember Long
Good to see
Pond
you.
Yeah, sure. That's awesome. Fantastic.
Watson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I used to be a regular at Watsonburger. Yeah, right. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Very well.
There she is.
Are you making an extended tour?
Jennifer.
Yeah, quite a bit. Pretty much between now and the election.
Hi, Julia. Hi. Your husband. Oh. I'm on the
Okay, great.
Oh, great.
So just keep up the good work.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Terrific.
The Invest in Iowa effort that Citizen Action.
Yeah, I've been here a few. Here in Ames.
Oh, I'm still sweating over that.
Chemistry department for 40 years.
I know too much. What year did you graduate? It was a lot simpler before I started asking questions.
Well, I like 13. We're always 13 years ahead of you.
And she's better in some ways. Have you
Not that
seen
much,
the
but some.
Interfaith
My
Alliance,
mother's my father died, my mother's moved in with my brother down in San Antonio. So I don't really have any family
that
out
was
there.
their first shot at the question.
But I was
They
up
have
last early this
They
year
weren't
for the
expecting that question.
They should have been
Grayson County Democratic Party.
But what they were expecting was questions about
Fairly well
school
organized.
closings and budgets. We can't talk our relatives
Yeah.
in there. Yeah, politics for some reason.
But Denison's doing well.
Gail Sherman, they've always had
Yeah.
this
Well, I'm going to vote for
well, I think we're going to
Sherman sort of going down and Denison's coming up. Yeah. Denison's become an art gallery. They got
He
like
did not
40 art
answer that
galleries.
either of those
Main
questions.
Street.
Main Street's going to turn into
So,
art gallery.
yeah, a lot of them flip-flops.
Thank you. Same here. So listen to
So I'm
these
still,
other folks.
starting out. I think I'm going to have to call a meeting.
You're going to be in Des Moines tonight.
Yes, I am.
Did I listen the second time? You're second.
Yeah, don't make him sign it.
If you want to look at that thing, it has a number of church state types.
Whether can I access this on the
They
net?
banned it from the game.
Yeah, but it's
They didn't ban me from
I think it's Ames Interfaith Alliance.
I spent a summer breaking rocks on the creek, where like if you missed, you got knocked for about half hour.
It's been a while since
Yes.
And young people might not be smart.
Johnny Hammond asked me to run, and they say, "Oh."
I mean, I had a class that technically started at my professor's grandmother.
Good to see you.
We can make that work. No, we're just kind of playing around with it here. I wonder. I'm wanting to get this thing. Do you think we can rig this thing on here? I got a lot of paper I got to shuffle around.
Okay.
See if you can.
I don't know about that.
It's plugged into that microphone.
Yeah.
That
I don't know if we can. I don't think there's any way to attach that.
Yeah, they don't
have- There's no way to
they don't have a
connect
clip
it
for
on
that.
there.
I don't think there's a clip in here for this, but let me take a look.
Okay.
No, there isn't for that. No, there isn't.
Now he said that there was a microphone that clipped on
Oh, I can do that.
yeah.
because he has a lot of papers. So
Where's
he
the
doesn't
we can
case?
clip it
It's
to
over
him.
here.
Where's the case? Over here? All right.
Spend 10 minutes with him.
I know. I told him.
Long time ago.
Very long time ago.
And you are.
I'm from Richmond.
We're not all that proud of it. Think of ourselves as Western.
Testing 1, 2.
On the high plains.
We've been hiding.
No, that works for me.
For the last 6 years, we've been hiding.
Yeah, right.
My sister called me. just met the other Democrat, and then we're going to get him right. We're going to do it right.
You know, that's about what it was in Ames when we first came.
All right. I came in 73.
So is that one off?
53.
Yeah, I think the anti-war movement has read a fairly healthy batch of liberal. I appreciate that. Maybe I'm right.
Oh, we worked hard on that.
Very red place now.
Very good.
Well, I got to slip away. I got to get on the edge because I have to slip away to teach a class here.
You're enjoying this.
I am. A little cooler. In the shade, I'd be happy. Okay, I obviously would make a very good Texan. Okay. All right, we're going to start. Okay. All right.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started. I'd like to welcome you all to our event today and thank you for braving this extreme sun. So I welcome you on behalf of all of the sponsoring organizations, which include the Committee on Lectures, which is funded by the governing student body, also the Alliance for Global Justice and the ISU branch of Amnesty International, and Iowans for Sensible Priorities. And I'd also like to thank and welcome two special guests today who are here to help introduce our speaker. And the first is Johnny Hammond, who is our own Texas transplant and former state senator, and also Beth Wessel-Kroschel, who is a current state representative. So thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank you, Julian. Well, this university has had the privilege in recent years now of hearing from three of my favorite Texans, Ann Richards, Molly Ivins, and today, Jim Hightower. As a former Texan and a state legislator, I adopted one of his favorite animals as a campaign logo, the armadillo. I always said that I was tough on the outside, soft on the inside, and I certainly tried to avoid the middle of the road. Jim Hightower's words of wisdom about that interesting animal, and it is an interesting animal, were memorialized in his first book, There's Nothing in the Middle of the Road But Yellow Stripes and Dead Armadillos. I brought along one of my collection today, and I'm going to set it up here on the left side of the podium to remind you, Jim, as you speak to us. I hope you'll stay there. Now, State Representative Beth Wessel-Kroschel will introduce Jim Hightower to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. Thanks, everyone, for being here this afternoon. Jim Hightower is a national radio commentator, writer, public speaker, and author of Thieves in High Places. They've stolen our country, and it's time to take it back. He has spent 3 decades battling on behalf of consumers, working families, environmentalists, small businesses, and just plain folk. Twice elected Texas Agriculture Commissioner, Hightower believes that the true political spectrum is not from right to left, but from top to bottom, and he has become a leading national voice for the 80% of the public who no longer find themselves within shouting distance of Washington powers. His commentaries are carried on commercial and public stations, the web, Armed Forces Radio, Radio for Peace International, One World Radio, Sirius Satellite Radio, and Air America. Each month he publishes a populist political newsletter, which I've seen a lot of them floating around here today, called the Hightower Lowdown, which is the fastest growing political publication in America. I often wonder how Johnny Hammond and Jim Hightower could come from the same state as George Bush. Please join me in welcoming Jim Hightower to Iowa State.
Thank you so much, Johnny and Beth. You know, we've got a saying in Texas that the rooster crows, but the hen delivers the goods. I think that's what we've got right here in these two great public representatives that have served so well in this area. It just makes me happier than a mosquito at a nudist colony to look out at all you good folks here on the lawn of Iowa State today and to be here with Iowans for Sensible Priorities. This is a great bunch that's undertaken a great and historic grassroots effort to try to deliver a little bit of common sense to Washington, which is probably about as hard as delivering a bag of ice to hell, but nonetheless, they're giving it a good push. I thank you in Iowa State for letting a scrawny Texas populist come onto the grounds here without having me dipped at the border. That's a courtesy that we Texans don't often get anymore. Sensible Iowans, you can find them at sensibleiowans.com. It's a savvy and spunky group that's daring to talk back to the power elites, pushing a common sense budget that wants to impose a little bit of fiscal sanity rather than letting the Pentagon throw billions and billions of our dollars at Lockheed, Halliburton, Bechtel, Boeing, or any other fat cat corporation that owns a couple of Congress critters and travels with a pack of $600 an hour lobbyists. These power elites are playing a cynical insider game, playing it with our money, by the way, a game that's perverting our democracy and distorting our priorities as a democratic people. Iowans for Sensible Priorities are engaged in an exercise in old-time democracy, an attempt by ordinary folks to take our country back, to take it back from the plutocrats and autocrats and theocrats and kleptocrats that have stolen our country from us. These corporate powers, they get to thinking that they're the top dogs and the rest of us just a bunch of fire hydrants out here in the countryside. Well, that's what we're up against. And I've come here for a couple of days. This event today launches a 2-day barnstorming tour, 5 cities we're doing across Iowa. But I've come here mainly to thank Sensible Iowans for the good job that you're doing and urge you to keep on keeping on. I know that it's not easy, as some of you students are learning, to question authority, to challenge power. You get to feeling like that guy that B.B. King sang about. Nobody likes you but your mama, and she might be jiving you too. Did you ever get feeling like that? Well, Woodrow Wilson applied that same sentiment to Washington. He said, if you want to make enemies, try to change something. Well, all Sensible Iowans is trying to change is the systemic problem of budgeting by corporate cronyism, a system that inherently prizes profits over people, war over peace, backroom deals over good deals. Just give you one example of it. Just days after the horrific crash bombings of 9/11, lobbyists from Boeing Corporation hit the Pentagon and Congress with a sickening scam to profiteer on that horror. Their offer was to lease 10 of its 767 passenger planes to the Air Force, for the Air Force to convert into tankers. You might think, well, that's pretty generous, except for 2 things. One, the Air Force didn't need any tankers. It already had all that it could use. And secondly, Boeing was not offering to lease them for free. They were going to charge $23.5 billion to lease them for 10 years. And that is $5 billion more than if the Air Force had gone down to the tanker dealership and bought 10 new tankers right off the floor. And then they tried to do this deal in secret, and the Pentagon official who negotiated this deal in secret in a crony corporate deal then took a high-paying job with Boeing. This is why Lily Tomlin has said no matter how cynical you get, it's just almost impossible to keep up. Now for some good news. The people of America are revolting, in the very best sense of that term. You don't hear much about it from the infamous liberal media, the media owned by such liberals as Rupert Murdoch, General Electric, Time Warner, Disney Inc., and Viacom, but all across America, ordinary folks just like you are lighting little prairie fires of rebellion on everything from living wage to public financing of their elections to battling the beast of Bentonville, Walmart. And now right here in Iowa, an agitated, organized public is rising up to provide a little bit of tough love to that bloated, obese, corrupt, misdirected, inefficient, antiquated, sugar-addicted, bureaucratic jumble known as the Pentagon. I'll just give you one statistic. Pentagon's all about numbers, but I'll just offer you one here. Next year's Pentagon budget is to be $463 billion. That is more than will be appropriated for every other federal program combined. All of the money that goes to the environment, to agriculture, to education, to job training, to food stamps, foreign aid, national parks, you name it, all of that combined does not add up to what the Pentagon is going to take. You know, you can put earrings on a hog, but it still won't hide the ugliness. And the Pentagon is the big ugly hog of federal spending. We need a Pentagon that defends us, not one that bleeds us. And we need an honest federal budget that invests in our total national security. Imagine with me for a moment. Imagine a country in which everyone has health care. A country in which all vehicles, homes, industries, farms, and communities are powered with renewable, non-polluting energy sources. Imagine a country in which the public schools, pre-K through PhD, are the best in the world and free to all. Imagine a decent retirement awaiting every human being. Imagine a country in which jobs and prosperous farms and small business opportunity, not corporate greed, are the object and hallmark of the economy. Imagine that country. Well, guess what? That country could be ours. And it can be ours, will be ours, if we demand it and if we build it. For starters, as sensible Iowans are advocating, let's trim a mere $60 billion out of that $463 billion Pentagon bloat. This is not recommended, by the way, by a bunch of balloon-flying ex-hippies like me. This is the recommendation of people like Lawrence Korb, who is the Assistant Defense Secretary under Ronald Reagan, and a coterie of generals and admirals and other former military officials. It still leaves the Pentagon with as much money as the rest of the world combined spends on their militaries, and it leaves us free of the taxing burden of paying for weapons that don't work, aren't needed, or were designed for a bygone era. The powers that be are out to militarize our country, militarizing our national budget, our economy, our society, our national purpose, our very national purpose. This is against everything that America stands for. Benjamin Franklin said it well at the founding. He said, the destiny of America is not power, it's light. Light. And the light he was talking about is that beacon of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all. That's what we represent. The alternative to militarization. The alternative to militarization is not weakness, it's moral strength, showing what a civilization can be in terms of those basic human values of fairness, justice, opportunity for all. Well, it's up to us. We can have the America that we want. That's my basic message to you here this afternoon. But we must fight for it. The key is what sensible Iowans are doing. Grassroots education and agitation. You know, they say that the first job of a citizen is to keep your mouth open. And that's true. But it always helps if that mouth is attached to a brain, doesn't it? And that's what Sensible Iowans is doing. Traveling day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out. Not just in the blue areas of Iowa, but out there in the red areas as well. Educating people about where their money is going. That's what we have to do. I'm asking you to get involved if you're not already with this great group. And again, they've got the sign-up table somewhere close by. And they've got materials. You can go to sensibleiowans.com and learn about it all. But it's up to us. They can't do it by themselves. We have to team up as a citizenry to do it. I saw a political button not long ago. It's the best one I've ever seen. I was up in Vermont. And this guy came up wearing a button and said, wearing a button is not enough. And that's the truth. We cannot be a nation of button wearers. We've got to be a little stronger than that. I think my speech is over, according to the bells that are tolling here. Let me just add one thing, though. It's a long-term fight that we're in. It's not about between now and November, or even 2008. We're in it for the long haul. My friend Willie Nelson told me once, he said, Hightower, the early bird might get the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. I'll just let you think about that a little bit. So we got to keep in this fight for the long haul. And remember one other thing, and that is, this is fun. Battling the bastards is just about as much fun as you can have with your clothes on. It's a great Iowa tradition, and we can take them on and we can win. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Thanks to Sensible Iowans for what you're doing.
If anybody would like to ask some questions, go ahead. We have some time. Anybody have a question or for Mr. Hightower, a comment? Don't be shy. What about the budget, the higher Pentagon that just came out that wants more money?
Yeah. She's asking about the new Pentagon budget, that indeed. And bear in mind, when we talk about cutting $60 billion out of the $463 billion that Bush is seeking, we're not talking about the war. The $463 billion, that just keeps the war machine idling. To put it in gear, that's extra. So that's the $300 billion that they dumped into Iraq. And that's the $88 billion that they put into Afghanistan. That's extra. We're not talking about taking any money from the funds that go to the troops. We're talking about taking the money from Halliburton and Bechtel and Boeing and the likes of that. But exactly, they will keep pushing. They've added, for the last 4 years, they've added $50 billion a year, added to the Pentagon budget, not to the war budget, to the Pentagon budget. And that's money that's coming from Head Start, that's coming from the opportunity of kids, every kid to have health care, coming from the repair of our infrastructure all across the country. Well, a very good point. We're mortgaging our country to China, also to Japan, a couple of other countries as well. They are the ones who are picking up the debt or buying the bonds that this $300 billion extra that's being charged to our children. They're picking up the federal debt. They hold it. In other words, they're the banker, so they own it, and that means they own us if at some point they want to take a whack at us. And then to add insult to injury, we are offshoring to China much of the manufacturing of this weaponry that we taxpayers are buying and charging to China. Yes. Yeah, Bush's statement last night about the 9/11 terrorists are finally going to get justice. I mean, pardon me for being cynical, but I've lost all belief in anything that it comes out of Bush's mouth. I'm not sure. Maybe they have these terrorists, and if they do, it's a good thing. But even there, we don't have to subvert our values as a people, including a rule of law. Maybe not the full coverage that we get under our Constitution, but certainly the ability to see the evidence against you, to have a lawyer working with you. Otherwise, we're giving up who we are, and we should not give that to the terrorists. So I think we have to have a different approach than what Bush is proposing. I'll give you a couple of words of advice. One, always drink upstream from the herd. Two, never sign nothing by neon. I've been there. And three, never eat at a restaurant that has a hand-lettered sign saying bargain kebabs. And four, never believe a word that comes out of George Bush's mouth. Well, my vision to revitalize rural America, if we could redirect the Pentagon budget, would include investing in grassroots enterprise, being small farms, converting agriculture, mass production into sustainable, as organic as possible, local marketing, direct farmer marketing in the international market, not just through Cargill, but directly to the buyers, the development of food processing and other facilities at a grassroots level, not calling in Cargill or Del Monte or somebody to come build a factory and giving them bribes, but instead investing in local communities to build their own. And then a very thorough education and job training program at the grassroots level. That would do it. demagoguery about immigration, and it is demagoguery. It's cruelly and destructively divisive in our society. I see the immigration issue, which Karl Rove basically conceived of. He thought it was going to be an easy target. Those immigrants they don't have any power, so they can't fight back. Well, hello. Suddenly, we had 500,000 turnout in Dallas, Texas. This is the red area, I mean, it was extraordinary, and you've seen your own experiences with the immigrant rallies and et cetera. But to me, it offers us an opportunity to shift the debate off of impoverished people who are coming, as I would go, to better themselves and their families if I was in their situation. Shift it from them onto the people that are causing this impoverishment, onto the corporate elites that wrote NAFTA. And the result of NAFTA in Mexico has been a dramatic increase in poverty there, not a reduction in poverty. And so we got to deal with the causes of it. Anybody over on this side? Yep.
Jim, it seems like the problems in Washington are not a partisan issue right at this point. You've got all the warmongers on the blue and red side at this point. People like Joe Lieberman and the leadership of the Democratic Party really let down America, I think, just as much as the people who planned it. So I guess, how do you take the fight away from a partisan issue, and who am I supposed to vote for in November?
Yeah. Well, absolutely, you're right. I mean, the problem is not the Republicans. We know who George Bush is. He's an absolute corporate wet dream. He always has been. I saw him do it in Texas as governor, and he's doing the same thing there. That's not the problem. The problem is we need our own party. And the Democrats' leadership in Washington have abandoned us for corporate campaign contributions. Nothing more noble than that. But there's a change coming, as Joe Lieberman will tell you. Joe Lieberman got a little comeuppance, and now he's getting a chilly reception from the people that previously apparently were his buddy. So we have to deliver that message and build it ourselves at a grassroots level. I don't know the people running here in Iowa, so I can't tell you who to vote for, except generally the Democrats this time, because it's not a one-step process. We're in at least the Texas two-step here. The first process is to get rid of these Bushites. And a way to do that, we can't do anything about them until 2008. But right now, we can change the dynamics of Washington entirely by changing the House of Representatives and, if possible, the Senate. But certainly the House of Representatives, that is within our grasp. There's an old country song, "It felt so good when it stopped hurting." And that's what we're looking for this year. Stop the hurting. And then we make our progressive push, and that message is going to come through, just as other senators are getting the message about Lieberman's defeat in the Democratic primary. They're recognizing that there's another dynamic that they had not understood.
Thank you for coming today. Leave us with a word of wisdom that you cherish from Ann Richards.
Ann Richards. Well, generally, we are, and Beth was mentioning it, or Johnny was, or Beth and Johnny were mentioning it, that, you think of Texas as George Bush and the likes of that, Dick Armey and Tom DeLay, I saw a Republican on television say, well, sometimes Tom DeLay is his own worst enemy, and I said, not while I'm alive, he's not. But Ann Richards, Molly Ivins, Bill Moyers, Texans all, John Henry Falk, we're not without our own. And Texas fundamentally is a populist state. What's happened in Texas is not that everybody's turned right-wing or turned Republican. They quit voting because the Democratic Party quit being a Democratic Party. So those working stiffs and the chemical plants and the small farmers and the waitress who's got 3 jobs, they don't hear anything that's appealing to them. That's beginning to change, though, so we're building it back. And I think Ann Richards would say that to you, that the hope is in the people themselves. And that's how I can remain optimistic. If I got my impression of what America's all about by watching the nightly news, I would be horribly depressed and retreat into the woods somewhere. But luckily, I get to travel a whole lot, and I see ordinary folks doing extraordinary things, like Sensible Iowans, taking it back one step at a time, one precinct at a time, one county, one state. Anybody else? That's it? Okay. Thank you all. Join Sensible Iowans.
If anybody has any books that you want signed, bring them up. And we have sign up over there for Sensible Iowans. Great to go. Thank you very much. Bring it right here? Yeah, sure. Unwire yourself, yes. Dewire.
Put that in the bag.
Yep.
Where is your car? Where do you want to eat?
That'd be all right.
Set it over here so